The Trump administration escalating its fight against drug cartels, carrying out another deadly strike on a boat it says was carrying drug smugglers.
The U.S. military says it has struck 4 more alleged drug smuggling boats in the eastern Pacific Ocean.
I don't think we're going to necessarily ask for a declaration of war. I think we're just going to people that are bringing drugs into our country.
They didn't expect a war that morning, but the ocean gave them one. A U.S. Navy helicopter locked onto a cartel speedboat tearing across open water at 50 miles per hour. A vessel already linked to months of surveillance, 3 federal agencies, and a cocaine haul worth hundreds of millions.
15 people were arrested in the largest drug seizure under the current administration.
But buried in the early intel was a detail so out of place it stopped veteran officers cold, because it hinted this crew wasn't just running drugs, but something far more dangerous. The launch. 4,000 pounds of pure cocaine sat loaded in a fiberglass speedboat on Colombia's Pacific coast, and the FBI had just hours to stop it before it disappeared into American streets forever.
The U.S. military says it has struck 4 more alleged drug smuggling boats in the eastern Pacific Ocean.
6 months before that helicopter opened fire, FBI agents in Miami uncovered intelligence that would lead to one of the largest cocaine seizures in maritime history.
Earlier this week, the Coast Guard announced the largest cocaine seizure in its history.
Wiretaps revealed the Sinaloa cartel was significantly expanding maritime operations, with intercepted communications referencing major investments in go-fast boat infrastructure along Colombia's Pacific coast. Agents monitoring encrypted channels picked up repeated mentions of the fast ones, cartel code for high-performance speedboats designed explicitly to outrun federal patrol vessels. When technical analysts pulled the details, they understood why stopping these boats would require more than standard Coast Guard cutters. Go-fast boats are purpose-built trafficking platforms constructed from lightweight fiberglass and powered by twin outboard engines generating 900 combined horsepower. They hit speeds exceeding 50 miles per hour on open water while running completely dark.
They can carry a big load, and with multiple engines, they move really quickly.
Dark. No lights, no identification transponders, and a radar signature so minimal that standard maritime surveillance routinely misses them. Crews operated in shifts under strict radio silence, rationing fuel precisely to reach transfer points in international waters where other vessels would take the load north. The numbers behind this operation were staggering. Intelligence indicated the cartel was preparing to launch a boat carrying 4,475 pounds of pure cocaine, over 2 tons, at wholesale prices approximately $100 million. However, once cut and distributed into more than 6 million individual doses, the street value would exceed $300 million.
That's enough to fatally overdose the entire population of the state of Florida.
If this shipment made landfall, it would vanish into domestic networks within hours. Overdose rates would spike across multiple states as dealers flooded markets with products sourced directly from this run.
An animal tranquilizer cut with America's street drug of the moment, itself utterly awful.
The cartel would collect a 9-figure payday, and the smugglers would disappear before federal agents could trace a single connection. The FBI had the intelligence, projected routes, launch windows, and vessel characteristics, but could not stop a speedboat moving at such speed across thousands of square miles of ocean.
There's usually an offloading team that will have, like a rental boxcar to take the payload.
They needed aviation assets, long-range surveillance, and strike capability that only 2 other agencies possessed. Intelligence confirmed the boat was being prepared for launch. The window to act was closing fast. Within hours, 3 federal agencies began coordinating what would become one of the most sophisticated maritime interdictions ever executed in the Western Hemisphere.
I don't think we're going to necessarily ask for a declaration of war. I think we're just going to kill people that are bringing drugs into our country.
Assembling the strike force. Decoded intelligence placed the target vessel in the final loading stages somewhere along Colombia's Pacific shoreline. Federal investigators calculated they had roughly 72 hours before departure. A go-fast boat capable of sustained 50-mile-per-hour speeds could reach mid-ocean transfer coordinates before responding units assembled.
What are you looking for?
I'm actually looking for blacked-out vessels and any suspicious activity we can find.
Time pressure demanded immediate partner engagement. The assembled task force operated under a single mandate: prevent this shipment from reaching transfer points in international waters where it would vanish into secondary smuggling channels. The FBI brought surveillance data but possessed zero maritime interdiction capability. Naval forces commanded destroyers, advanced detection arrays, and aviation assets capable of monitoring enormous ocean sectors, yet operated without civilian law enforcement powers beyond territorial boundaries.
We simulated having a Hellfire on the wing of the aircraft, and we found a target to engage with.
Coastal Security Services alone held authorization to conduct arrests, boardings, and seizures in international zones. The operational solution involved deploying Coast Guard law enforcement detachments, compact teams that embed aboard military vessels to provide federal authority for counter-narcotics missions. With these detachments present, naval platforms gain legitimate standing to conduct enforcement operations, converting military sensors and aircraft into legally authorized interdiction tools. Orders directed an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer toward the search sector, 9,000 tons mounting SPE-1D phased array radar providing continuous 360 surveillance across massive areas. Coast Guard cutters accelerated southward at 28 knots, each carrying specialized boarding teams trained for hostile vessel capture.
We're seeing 4 and 5 tons of drugs come in per run, and we're seeing 1 or 2 per week at this point.
Overhead, a Navy P-8A Poseidon, essentially a militarized Boeing 737 packed with synthetic aperture radar and electro-optical sensors, began systematic scanning of projected smuggling corridors. The aircraft's detection range covered over 100,000 square kilometers per patrol, filtering legitimate traffic from suspicious high-speed contacts. The plan was simple. The Navy handles detection using long-range radar and aerial surveillance. FBI confirms targets match intelligence profiles. Coast Guard executes interdiction with full legal authority, but decoded communications confirmed the worst. The target vessel had completed loading and departed Colombian waters.
Who seek to flood our community with narcotics, deadly fentanyl, and other illicit substances.
Over 2 tons of product was racing northward at maximum velocity. Crew was convinced the ocean's size provided protection. They were wrong. Multiple federal platforms were already converging with detection technology capable of isolating a single craft across areas equivalent to entire states.
There was a link-up point of another potential boat. Drugs were still there. They were actively interacting with them.
200 nautical miles from Central American coastlines, the Navy was about to prove that the ocean offers no hiding places not from American radar.
This mission and our mission, as successful as it is to detect and monitor, to get the drugs.
The net tightens. At exactly 6:14 in the morning, sensor operators aboard the P-8A Poseidon detected the target intelligence had warned them about A go-fast boat was moving through a known trafficking corridor with all lights off. The aircraft's synthetic aperture radar worked alongside its electro-optical and infrared cameras. Together, the systems filtered out wave clutter and helped the crew separate normal marine traffic from suspicious vessels. The intelligence criteria were clear. The target would show no transponder signal. Its speed would match smuggling profiles. Its position would fall along established routes. Its departure would occur within a predicted time window. When radar technicians reported a contact at bearing 270, 15 miles out, traveling at 50 knots and broadcasting no identification, the crew knew the match was exact. All parameters aligned. Aboard the destroyer, bridge personnel altered heading immediately. Below deck, law enforcement detachment members moved to action stations. In the vessel's aircraft hangar, helicopter crews initiated launch preparations alongside the team that would prove critical. Hitron, the helicopter interdiction tactical squadron, represents the Coast Guard's premier capability for neutralizing go-fast boats. These sharpshooters train exclusively to disable vessel engines using precision rifle fire from airborne platforms. The unit achieved its 1,000th successful interdiction in August 2025.
15 people were arrested in the largest drug seizure under the current administration.
26 years after formation in 1999. Across that period, Hitron operations have prevented over $33 billion in narcotics from entering American distribution networks.
So it's some cool weapons, some cool hardware, and really, really cool people.
That's roughly one interdiction every 9 days for over 2 decades. Coast Guard cutters advanced from the east. Tactical teams prepared for a boarding that could turn hostile. The destroyer's radar kept an unbroken track on the target and transmitted updated position data to all responding units. Overhead, the P-8A maintained altitude and kept its sensors locked onto the go-fast boat.
This is Boeing's Poseidon P-8A, the RAF's new maritime patrol aircraft,
which continued moving north at full speed. The cartel crew had no idea they were being hunted. From their perspective, sunrise was breaking over empty water. Their twin engines ran smoothly. GPS showed 60 nautical miles remaining to their meeting point. Everything suggested their mission would succeed. They could not detect the destroyer's radar tagging them as Contact Charlie 17. They could not see cutters closing in from multiple directions. They could not know that a Seahawk helicopter 40 miles away was completing its final checks. The $300 million cargo they carried had become the center of a coordinated federal operation supported by assets worth hundreds of millions combined. As dawn spread across the Caribbean, Coast Guard observers on the lead cutter gained visual contact. A white-hulled speedboat with twin engines and absolutely no intention of stopping. High-speed pursuit across open water. As dawn approached, lookouts on the cutter's bow confirmed visual contact. They could now clearly see the target. Once the vessel was in range, the cutter's bridge followed standard procedure and issued the first warning over marine radio. Unidentified vessel, this is the United States Coast Guard. Cut your engines and prepare for boarding. The Coast Guard always uses the term unidentified vessel at the start of an encounter, even when they strongly suspect smuggling. It is a formal legal phrase used until the target either responds, slows down, or reveals its identity. In this case, the go-fast boat had no registration numbers, no transponder signal, and no radio reply. That made it officially unidentified under maritime law. The smugglers did not answer. They kept their engines at full power and stayed on course. That silence was expected. It also made the situation clear. The radio hail was their final chance to surrender without force. For several seconds, the crew on board the go-fast boat had to make a decision. They knew federal aircraft were in the sky. They knew cutters were closing in behind them. They understood that stopping meant prison, and running meant risking their lives. In that moment, they weighed the stakes with cold precision. Their choice came quickly. They ran. The chase ignited instantly. The twin outboards screamed to full power, blasting water into a white plume as the hull lifted and skimmed across the surface. Speed climbed past 50 miles per hour. The boat knifed through the morning swell while the crew clung to the console. They knew they could not outrun a helicopter, but adrenaline and fear kept them pushing forward. Every second ahead felt like one more chance at escape. Behind them, the Coast Guard cutter swung its crane arm and launched its 26-foot over-the-horizon pursuit craft. The interceptor hit the water hard, engines roaring as its tactical interdiction team locked into position. Armored, fast, and built for hostile boardings, the craft tore after the fleeing smugglers. Both boats hammered through the waves. The smugglers began violent zigzag turns, each one throwing tall arcs of seawater skyward as they tried to break the intercept angle. At 50 miles per hour, every sharp turn risked capsizing, but panic had replaced reason. Then everything changed. From the destroyer's flight deck, the MH-60 Seahawk lifted off, rotor blades beating the air and water below. The aircraft banked sharply and accelerated with a speed the boat could never match. Within moments, it closed distances that had taken the pursuit craft minutes to cover. The smugglers looked up and their hope collapsed. That helicopter was closing fast. Fear pushed them into desperation. One smuggler ripped open the storage hatch and began hurling cocaine bricks into the sea. He did it for one reason. If they were captured with a smaller load, the charges could be reduced. Destroying evidence was their only remaining tactic. Each kilo was worth $30,000 wholesale. Splash. Another splash. In 30 seconds, $6 million vanished into water too deep to recover. But the engine stayed at full throttle. They still believed distance meant survival, even as every sign pointed to the opposite. $300 million in potential street value was racing across the Caribbean at maximum speed while federal forces closed from every direction.
The administration says these operations are part of a broader effort to stop what they call narco-terrorism.
The Coast Guard pursuit craft locked on their wake. Overhead, the Seahawk grew larger in their field of view, rotor wash whipping seawater into a swirling mist. The smugglers were running out of ocean, running out of options, and running out of time. The Seahawk held steady at 50 yards. Inside the aircraft, a hit-drawn marksman prepared to take the shot that would end the pursuit and secure the year's largest cocaine interdiction. Precision strike under impossible conditions. The hit-run marksman's targets weren't the men aboard that speedboat. They were the twin engines at maximum throttle, and federal regulations specified exactly one authorized method to stop them. The helicopter held a stable position 50 yards above the fleeing craft. Inside the cabin, the marksman positioned behind a precision rifle secured near the open door. His training prepared him for precisely this scenario. One properly placed round terminates the pursuit. One misplaced shot transforms law enforcement into something worse. Federal interdiction protocols mandate graduated force. The cutter had transmitted visual signals and loudhailer commands ordering the vessel to halt. When ignored, the Seahawk's door-mounted M240 machine gun delivered a controlled burst across the bow, rounds deliberately hitting empty water forward of the boat.
We simulated having a hellfire on the wing of the aircraft, and we found a target to engage with.
The message was unmistakable. Stop now, or force escalates. The smugglers maintained full throttle. One authorized option remained: disabling fire directed exclusively at propulsion machinery, not the hull, not the crew, only the mechanical systems maintaining the motion. The authorization came through internal comms. Shooter, you are cleared to engage. Propulsion systems only. The marksman executed minute adjustments, compensating for helicopter vibration and the target's erratic movement. Through the optical sight, white engine cowling partially obscured by salt spray, the boat executed a hard starboard turn. He compensated the port, tracking the motion. Rotor vibration caused the crosshairs to oscillate. The boat was slamming through swells, engines rising and falling with each wave, creating a target moving in 3 dimensions simultaneously. He released half a breath, suspended between heartbeats, applied trigger pressure. 3/4 of a second later, the round penetrated the starboard engine casing precisely on target. Sparks erupted, followed by flame and black smoke as the engine experienced catastrophic seizure. The mechanism locked solid, propeller ceasing rotation. The boat lurched violently, losing half its thrust, but the port engine continued screaming, dragging the vessel forward asymmetrically. The marksman adjusted fractionally, fired the second round. This projectile struck the port engine center mass, ripping through critical components. Metal fragments exploded outward in spray and smoke. The engine died instantly, the drive shaft locking with violent shock. The transformation was immediate. The speedboat, tearing across the ocean at 50 miles per hour, suddenly skidded laterally across its own wake, nearly capsizing before settling into complete motionlessness. The smugglers, operating on adrenaline and desperation moments before, now had 0 options remaining. The Coast Guard tactical craft surged forward, and what boarding teams discovered shocked even veteran investigators who'd seen dozens of major busts. What shocked federal agents? The instant the tactical team members stepped aboard, both crew members surrendered. No weapons, no resistance.
These U.S. Coast Guard crews, guns drawn, seizing a small drug smuggling vessel.
Coast Guard personnel initiated documentation, every bundle photographed, weighed, tagged with unique codes, and entered into digital chain of custody systems tracking materials from seizure through prosecution. Boarding teams were not surprised by what they saw, but the scale still hit hard. The cargo hold was packed from floor to ceiling with cocaine bricks, exactly the type of load intelligence had warned them about. The weight came out to 4,475 pounds, matching the estimates passed through federal channels. At wholesale prices, the shipment was worth over $100 million. On the street, it would have exceeded $300 million. The load confirmed everything agents already knew.
1,000 pounds of cocaine worth more than $165 million. 4 arrests were made.
This was a major cartel shipment, more than 2.2 tons of high-purity product. Once broken down for retail sale, it would have produced more than 6 million individual doses. That meant 6 million doses removed from circulation. 6 million opportunities for addiction stopped before reaching American neighborhoods. And one of the few chances to prevent the violence and crime that always follow when this amount of narcotics enters local markets. But what truly shocked investigators was what the crew carried with them. Their phones were seized intact. Complete call histories, GPS data, encrypted messaging apps, and comprehensive contact directories preserved exactly as discovered. But when federal analysts began extraction, they found something unexpected. The crew had been communicating with coordinators using sophisticated encrypted platforms previously unseen in maritime smuggling operations.
These U.S. Coast Guard crews, guns drawn, seizing a small drug smuggling vessel.
Message logs revealed the cartel had invested in Starlink satellite communication systems, the same technology seized from that unmanned submersible drone captured off Colombia in July 2025. The intelligence windfall was staggering. Contact directories didn't just link the crew to mid-level coordinators, they revealed an entire network spanning 3 countries. GPS metadata identified specific stash house locations along Colombia's Pacific coastline, where vessels were constructed and loaded. Financial app records traced payment flows from cartel controllers to vessel suppliers, fuel vendors, and corrupted port officials enabling launch operations. One encrypted message thread revealed something particularly shocking. This wasn't an isolated run. The cartel had 5 identical vessels in various stages of construction, each designed for similar high-value runs. The $300 million seizure had just exposed $1 billion maritime infrastructure investment. The 2 crew members received rights advisement and transferred to federal custody. Considering the cocaine quantity combined with the operation of an unregistered vessel in deliberate law enforcement evasion, both faced mandatory minimum sentences of 10 years with actual mass potentially escalating sentences toward life imprisonment. The Go Fast boat had cost the cartel $500,000 to construct. Precision rifle fire rendered it worthless. A shaped charge positioned against the hull detonated. Within 60 seconds, the vessel collapsed and disappeared beneath Caribbean waters.
Since early September, President Donald Trump has ordered a series of controversial military strikes on boats in the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific.
The cartel forfeited everything: vessel, crew, cocaine, and most critically, their operational security. Intelligence exploitation moved rapidly. Within 14 days, data extracted from those phones triggered 3 additional interdictions, 5 arrests, and tactical raids on 2 cartel safe houses across Central America. The seizure had become the opening thread that would ultimately dismantle an entire trafficking cell. Share this with anyone who thinks these operations don't matter, because what you just watched represents exactly how billion-dollar cartel networks get systematically torn apart. But understanding why this operation succeeded reveals something cartels have been desperately trying to solve for 3 decades, and they're still losing. The technology gap cartels can't close. For over 30 years, trafficking organizations have tried solving one problem: transporting cocaine across the open ocean without detection. They've invested billions pursuing that solution. Interdiction statistics prove they're still failing. During the 1980s, cartels relied on go-fast boats identical to the boat neutralized in this operation. When those became too vulnerable, they transitioned to semi-submersible vessels throughout the early 1990s. Low-profile craft operating inches above the waterline, practically invisible to radar. By the 2000s, they were constructing fully submersible narco-submarines capable of complete underwater transit. Some cost upward of $4 million and can transport 10 tons across Atlantic distances. In July 2025, Colombian authorities seized the first unmanned submersible drone.
Enacted the Colombian bilat as the vessel turned out to be a Colombian flag vessel with a Colombian crew.
A remote-controlled vessel engineered to eliminate crew capture risk, equipped with Starlink satellite communication. The technology advantage should favor cartels. They have unlimited funding, engineering expertise, and 0 legal constraints. Yet interdiction success rates tell a different story. Coast Guard reports indicate success rates approaching 90% against go-fast boats following Hitron's deployment in the late 1990s.
13 of these strikes on alleged drug boats. The U.S. military says the 4 boats taken out in the latest strikes were known by U.S. intelligence.
Even against semi-submersibles, the hardest vessels to detect, interdiction rates remain substantial, with Joint Interagency Task Force South disrupting hundreds of attempts since 2006. The explanation is straightforward: detection range asymmetry. A Cartel speedboat at 50 miles per hour covers a significant distance, but a P-8A Poseidon at 30,000 feet scans over 100,000 square kilometers per patrol.
This is a big piece of the investigation, essentially taking down the source of supply, disrupted this drug organization. Now we're going to dismantle it.
An Arleigh Burke destroyer's radar tracks contacts across that identical area continuously. Once detected, helicopters can close a 20-mile distance in minutes. The ocean's vastness, which smugglers depend on for concealment, becomes irrelevant when federal sensors monitor areas exceeding entire states. Cartels comprehend this, explaining their continued innovation. Yet every technological advancement by traffickers encounters superior radar, enhanced satellite surveillance, and tighter interagency coordination. This creates a strategic dilemma that cartels cannot resolve through innovation alone. Maritime routes remain necessary because land borders face saturation surveillance, yet maritime interdiction forces them into an unwinnable arms race where every adaptation gets countered by detection technology they cannot match and coordination they cannot replicate. Operations like this $300 million seizure prove that regardless of how fast cartels operate or how sophisticated their vessels become, the ocean has evolved into the battlefield where federal technology creates an insurmountable advantage. And with Hitron completing over 1,000 interdictions since 1999, averaging one every 9 days, preventing over $33 billion in narcotics from reaching American streets.
This Coast Guard cutter called the Weishi is back home off the coast of Alameda after 2 months away in a high seas bust of illegal drugs.
The message is clear. The ocean is no longer cartel territory. But this represents one engagement in a conflict evolving across decades. Operations like this involve thousands of cumulative hours by personnel rarely receiving recognition, intelligence analysts reconstructing fragmented communications, radar operators scanning empty ocean for extended periods, helicopter crews launching into uncertain conditions, and boarding teams confronting unknown threats. Their work occurs far from media coverage, yet protects millions from narcotics, driving addiction, violence, and fatalities across communities already facing resource limitations. The intelligence from this single bust has already dismantled an entire trafficking cell, triggered 5 arrests, and exposed a $1 billion maritime infrastructure investment the cartel thought was invisible. Every interdiction generates leads to subsequent operations. Every arrest exposes additional contacts. Every disruption degrades cartel operational confidence. This is how you dismantle criminal organizations, not through single strikes, but through relentless pressure, operation after operation, until networks collapse under accumulated exposure. And with operations like this happening every 9 days on average, the pressure never stops. If this breakdown revealed something mainstream media doesn't cover, subscribe right now for more authentic federal operations protecting Americans daily. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.